clean the goddamn cages. I heard metallic scraping. Or I'm kicking you out. I thought about hanging up. Then that same voice got sweet as pie and said she was Susan of Susan's Flying Doves. She had a sidebar story on her webpage. She was the little girl whose mom had bought her doves so long ago. Whatever. I told her my story. I needed doves for my friend, Winston. He wanted the white ones. He said, like in Picasso's peace painting. They had to circle the party, timed to some 80s song. That was Winston, the actor and director. He always planned a surprise. I'd used up my lunch break hunting the web. I told her Winston lives in Chula Vista. Could she get to the house with the doves? She said, I can help you with that, my love. She apologized for talking nasty to her daughter earlier on the phone. 2 doves would be $150. More if I wanted the Victorian cage. I asked her how it worked. Would the doves swoop back into the cage? Oh no, she explained. They had to fly back to Bonita. Then she added a disclaimer. She said her birds were homing pigeons. I felt like the air had leaked out of my party balloon. I asked her if the pigeons were white and looked like doves. Winston wanted doves, white doves. She explained that doves had bad GPS. Pigeons had a better track record. I first met Winston at work. It was a welcome to the new semester meeting, and the college president introduced Winston as our new Dean of Arts and Humanities at San Diego City College. He'd been a professor and chair of theater at Los Angeles City College. Then the president told us how we were all going to have to tighten our belts, take an extra 5 to 10 students. No way was I going to tell the faculty to add that many students to each of their 5 classes. That would be like teaching an extra class load, not good for student learning. Besides, I was a strong union person. Later that afternoon, I headed to the new dean's office. Winston pointed to the red tulip chair, the one he'd dragged in from his house. He sprawled out on a leather sofa with a notepad and pen, acting like a shrink about to take notes, then smiled. I stared at the jungle of house plants and wind chimes by the window. Who has wind chimes in his office? He told me to get to the academic senate. Here he was a dean reminding me about faculty rights. You don't care what that old president thinks. Winston had a firm and strong voice, but in time I would learn its nuances, the peskiness he could conjure in it when he teased. It could be deep and scolding on the front end, but the pause and broad smile would give him away. He reminded me that my peers had voted me in. It's you they want. Besides, I've got your back. He stood up, checking his voicemail, and motioned me to hang on. I was walking ahead of Winston to his office door when I heard him. "Oh, shit," he shouted. "My willow chairs." Then he was driving me from the admin lot to the faculty lot to get my hatchback. He said the willow chairs were hulky and wouldn't fit in his car. He'd buy dinner. He was all smiles, flipping his dreads behind his shoulders and asking me what I thought about the tortoiseshell dash in his Jag. Yeah, Jaguar. Who has a Jaguar? No one I knew. Well, technically, Winston didn't own it. It was used and financed. And I told him it reeked of cigarettes. He'd get it detailed. Within a week or two, Winston asked me over for dinner. He said we wouldn't talk work. We could sit in the circle of willow chairs. He'd have a few friends over. Winston lived in an older suburban neighborhood of Chula Vista, a ranch house with a weeping willow in the front. He led me past the kitchen where I saw an orange betta fish swimming in a little half-round wall tank filled with decor. Marbles, treasure chest, 2 glittery starfish, greenery. "What's your fish's name?" I asked. He shrugged and said, "It's a secret." He walked me through an eclectic living room full of modern furniture. African masks hung next to landscape oil paintings, a curio cabinet with all kinds of antique flasks and ornate writing pens, and a huge mirror over a dining room table. We passed through a screened-in porch. He told me that's where I want to put that Danish wood-burning stove. What did I think? He'd seen one on Park Boulevard, and we could go look at it on our lunch hour. Winston showed me his terraced garden, the top row where the artichokes he was roasting were planted. With each artichoke, Winston served a glass bowl of melted butter and sea salts in small wooden dishes with little silver spoons, one for each. On the salad, he said, "Try the pink Himalayan salt, Persian blue salt for the rice pilaf." He'd be serving the French carmage, ashy gray salt, with the chops he was barbecuing. He flipped over the smoky chops and said he was thinking about retirement, maybe in a couple of years. He wanted to turn a summer project into his first retirement goal, a script. He had a trip planned to do research at home, Taylor, Texas. I said, "Let me help you with that." I wanted to know more about him. What was it like to be a black kid in a small Texas town and find out you're gay? Later, he showed me his yearbook. Next to his photo, it read, "Thespian, cheerleader, bowling team, and junior cadet marching band." Then he asked me, "So besides being chair and teaching, what else are you thinking of doing?" I told him I wanted to start an underground garden biz, help friends and neighbors tear out lawns, design drought-resistant landscapes. "Hey, we got to do that garden business together," he said. I had wanted a new friend. As chair at work, it was hard to confide in colleagues because of the leadership position and confidentiality. Winston made light of office politics. He was spontaneous. We'd get off campus for lunch, stop in the Habitat on University and look at sequined pillows from India, the mid-century shop on Park with the orange Danish wood stove he coveted. We talked about art, movies, and plays. We wanted to get involved with community gardens and local arts. He was that friend who would take me into the next decade or two if I was lucky. One a few steps ahead of me, figuring out how to retire. Remember those good friends from childhood? You stuck with them because they knew things. They knew how to do things you didn't or couldn't. I wanted a friend who would make me laugh. Someone who wouldn't flinch if I said I was having random thoughts about quitting my career-paying job to stick plants in the ground and write. You'd be surprised who doesn't want to hear those kind of thoughts. Folks like your partner. Even co-workers. Why? Because you coexist, all in the same work groove. I was starting to get rat on the treadmill twinges. Winston was the answer to my wish for that new, honest friend. I just didn't know my friend was going to be a gay black man who knew more about sea salts, samba, and houseplants than me. Someone who moved his art and rearranged his living room at least once a month, like I did. A few years later, I was in the car on my way to yoga. My cell rang. It was a flip phone before cars synced with Bluetooth. It was Winston. Usually he began a call with a joke. But this time, he didn't do that. I told him I was driving and about to be late to yoga. I asked him, "Where have you been?" Winston was retiring. The last weeks of the semester were doubly busy for him. He wanted me to pull over, so I did. There was a pause. Then he said in a shaky voice, that he had lung cancer. He had come from the doctor and said he wanted me to know that he was going to need my help. I tried to make sense of what he just said. He had cancer, but he just retired. This sucked. I floundered, trying to put the past weeks together. So, you didn't have a headache the night you didn't come to the Bad Plus show. No wonder you didn't stay at your retirement party. I'm amazed you even came. I told him I was coming right over. Of course, I was going to help him. Then he asked me, "Do you think I'll make it?" While driving over, I felt the weight of knowing that lung cancer was tough to beat. My husband's father had died at 58 from it. A year before, I had been diagnosed with a cancer that required surgery and time off work. My family, my colleagues, my friends, especially Winston, had been there for me. I was lucky. It was understandable that even with all of Winston's other friends, he would call me. I'd beaten the odds. What worked for me might work for him. But I knew better than to tell Winston he would make it. Just like my own surgeon had said, "Nancy, we're going to go for the cure." But nothing was for sure. No one made promises. One night, we watched American Idol. It was midway through the season. I lay on the bed next to Winston and held his cell to his ears because his arms were shot, weakened and painful. Cancer had spread to the bone. He took calls from friends and made fun of bad singers. A campaign ad came on for Barack Obama. I guess I'm not going to make it to see the first black president. I felt terrible. We'd been reading Obama's dreams of my father to each other. He squeezed my hand and said, "Not going to find out who wins American Idol either. I hope it's this kid in the plaid pants. He's got the goods." After working with Shaka Khan in the 80s, Winston still thought he was the style expert. He asked me to fetch a pair of heavier socks. I shimmied them over his long feet. He winced. I smoothed them up his legs. When I turned to leave for home, he called me back. "You know, I've had a pretty good run." I drove home along a canal of water reflecting yellow lights on the 54. At first I thought Winston had given up. It hadn't been that long ago that in a short remission over the holidays, he'd had us over for dinner, sat outside and relaxed in the sun. Then I thought of how he really looked that night, bonier. His skin had a yellow tinge. He wanted a pork chop, crab cakes, but then ate nothing. It was me. I was being selfish. He'd found his peace, I told myself, his acceptance. I thought he would be the friend to lead the way, show me how the retirement thing could work. Instead, he was showing me how to die. Who else but him could be such a funny, loving friend in the last months of living with such a horrible cancer? For me, though, I had catching up to do. I found my anger. He was only 62. That was a short run. Fuck that shit. He'd only gotten his first retirement check. Now I needed to deposit it to pay his crazy expensive caregiving bills. All those years working, and for what? A lot changed quickly. Hospice came on, and as sick as Winston was, he started organizing his funeral. He wanted those doves. They had to be released during certain lines of that 80s hit, "On the Wings of Love." I had to Google the lyrics. "Just smile for me and let the day begin. You are sunshine that lights my heat within." What? I wanted to ask Winston's longtime friend, Tony, about that one. Winston was getting morphine and sleeping. One night, after a few visitors briefly said their goodbyes, I went back to Winston's room to be alone with him. I wasn't sure if he was going to make it another day or even night. It might have been the emotion in the air from the goodbyes. I tried to hold it all in. I stood over Winston and studied his beautiful face, his soft brow and closed eyes. His hair had grown back into a short afro. The dreads were long gone, but I'd kept a couple. I know, it sounds kind of weird. And I put them with my spiritual tokens. Something in me broke. I told him, I'm gonna miss you. I'll take care of your stupid fish. I don't want that orange Danish stove. I want you. I spilled hot tears on his forehead, poor guy. He didn't seem aware. Maybe he could hear me. I went on. Hell, don't tell me you're not really gonna be gone. That it'll just be like you're in that next room. I want you here. I told him I'd had a friend who hired me to tear out her lawn. She was letting me put in a dry creek bed, red flowering natives for hummingbirds. I needed help shoveling. This garden thing was happening. Another colleague had a sloping, gopher-ridden yard in Helix. Did Winston know how to get rid of gophers? And yes, I've made sure about the boat for half your ashes at sea. Yes, I made sure your mom has an urn to take the rest of you to Texas. And yes, I've lined up the Dove Lady.
That's Nancy Cary.